Okay. Okay, Baruch Hashem. So we're back in Likutey Halachot. I want to say that this class should be a refuah shlema for Shmuel Zalman.
Shmuel Zalman ben Chana.
Yeah, Shmuel Zalman ben Chana, a big tzaddik. You should have a refuah shlema completely. And should be a refuah shlema for Ora Bat Oga Nikadam. Did I say that right? If it's not, it should be to the right person. It should be for my father, Avram ben Sarah Esther, for Yosef ben Shulamit, Sasson ben Bracha, for Benjamin ben Mazal, if he's also still not feeling well. For all Klal Yisrael, should be a refuah shlema, should be an aliyah of the neshama, for my grandmother, Tzipor bat Tzima. We're in the middle of an amazing lesson right now. And Baruch ben Osnad as well. So we're learning like this. And Baruch Hai. Okay, everybody else, it'll be in mind. So it's very clear from Chassidut and Kabbalah that the main cause of lacking in this world is not the actual events that take place. It's not people, places, or things. It's not even, let's say, the pandemic or the hit that's been taken on the economy of the country, the situations that are now going on home as a result. It's a lack of one thing that's called da'at. Da'at means knowledge. And according to the deeper wisdom, and even on a simple level, da'at is the internalization. Says Rabbi Nachman, it's the internalization. It is the absorption into the heart and mind that Hashem is the manhig, that he is not just the creator of the world, but he is manhig. He is the one who causes everything to take place, and that everything that happens is a result of his active desire. And therefore, we need to know why, because it says in the Eitz HaChaim, the whole purpose of Hashem creating the world is that he should give good to us and that we should recognize his godlut. Now, godlut is, even though it literally means greatness, it's taught in Chassidut and Kabbalah, godlut is a code word for chesed, meaning Hashem's love. That the reason why Hashem created the world is that we should know that he loves us. Before we were created, he couldn't tell us that he loves us. So it's very beautiful. And now the question is, though, but we have so many struggles, we have so many difficulties, we have so many challenges. So where is Hashem's love? And the answer is at the beginning of you understanding there's Hashem's love there is to know that the event that's taking place is being caused by Hashem. Once you know that the event is being caused by Hashem, then you can recognize his love in the event. But prior to you knowing that, you can't. And for this, we know that all suffering comes from a lack of da'at, Rabbi Nachman says. But once a person has internalized, it's from Hashem and it's because he loves him. So once that's real for the person, then automatically the majority of his suffering goes away. Because suffering does not come from the event itself. However, it actually comes from the lack of da'at. Now, what is it that takes away our da'at? So we learned so far in this lesson in Likutey Halachot, which is based on a very special Torah in Likutey Moran, that is Tinyana Siman Chet, that is that we have three mochin, which in the language of Kabbalah, before even there was an organization or a movement that's called Chabad, there was actually a Kabbalistic entity which is called Chabad, that is Chokhmah Bina Da'at, that you have three levels of knowing. You have Chokhmah, wisdom, you have Bina, which is understanding, and you have Da'at, this is knowledge. When you have all three, that's called Chabad. And like we said in last class, this is the deeper inyan for why Chabad called themselves Chabad, because of their focus of this as being Ikar. Now, the reason for that, or at least one of the reasons for that, is in this Torah right here. That is that Da'at is the key to achieving our purpose of our life, that we should know Hashem. And specifically, according to Rabbi Nachman, that the knowing of Hashem is that we know that Hashem is Machadesh, that Hashem renews reality at every single moment. So if a person doesn't know that, he doesn't believe that, so he doesn't really know Hashem. Now, what's getting in the way of us knowing that? So Rav Nachman is bringing the event of the Nachash in Gan Eden. That we explained that in Gan Eden, we had three main players. We had Adam, we had Chava, and we had the Nachash. Now, according to Rabbi Nachman, Adam, which is based on Kabbalah, Adam is corresponding to your moach, to your mind. And Chava is keneged to Tefillah, your emunah. Now, what ends up happening is that your emunah or your tefillah is abducted, is seduced, is taken captured by the Nachash. Now, what does the Nachash represent? The Nachash represents sophistication. That he was called Arum, he's sophisticated. Now, through that sophistication, what is he trying to get you to do? He's trying to get you to eat from the tree. Now, we understand that Kabbalistically, eating from the tree is keneged. Eating is often keneged the act of sexuality. That when I engage in an act of sexual interaction, that's called eating. And we learn this as well just from Moshe Rabbeinu, that when Moshe Rabbeinu met Zippor for the first time, that Zippor's father said, why didn't you invite him in to eat? And it's explained by Chazal that the eating was a reference actually to sexual relations. Because we know that according to Halachah, one of the ways in which you affect Kedushin, that is, that you affect marriage halachically, according to Jewish law, is to have relations with the person. And therefore, by having relations, they would be married in effect. Okay? So therefore, what is he trying to get you to do? He's trying to get you to act in a way in which that you have a blemish, a pagam of the act of the area of sexuality. And then what happens? Then your da'at, your mind goes into exile. We learn this as well from the Lost Princess. We know that Rabbi Nachman said that people are not capable anymore even of listening to my Torah and doing teshuvah, meaning listening to my Torah and being so awakened that they're going to run all the way back to Hashem. From now on, I'm going to start telling stories. And in the last few years of his life, he began telling many, many stories. Now, these stories, while they appear to be the simplest of Rabbi Nachman's Torah, they actually are the deepest of Rabbi Nachman's Torah. That Rabbi Nachman himself said so. And in fact, it's said by others that it might be that these stories are the deepest things that were ever revealed in history. However, they appear to be like children's stories. The first story is called The Lost Princess. And in that story, you have a viceroy. The viceroy, he is second to Hashem, to the king in the story. It's called the king. And he has a viceroy. The king gets mad at his daughter. He sends her into exile. And the viceroy takes it upon himself to go look for her. As he's looking for her, he finally finds her. And the princess is no longer in Hashem or the king's kingdom. He's now in the place of evil, the place of all bad. And not only that, she's married at that point to the king in that place, who he is keneged Satan. That not only has he been taken to another place, but he's actually been taken capture by the other side. This is keneged Chava being seduced by Satan himself, or the Nachash. Now, ultimately, what ended up happening? That she said that the viceroy could free could free her if for 1 year he takes an hour out of every day, sounds familiar, and uses that hour to yearn only to free her. And the rest of the time, that even when he's not in that special place, he's always yearning to free her. And if he's yearning to free her only at the expense of everything else for 1 year, at the end of the year, on that last day, if he doesn't eat and he doesn't drink, he can free her completely. So this is keneged us freeing our emunah from exile, freeing our tefillah from exile, getting out of the slavery of the physical world and lifting ourselves up to emunah and knowing Hashem. And on the last day, what ends up happening? He walks towards to free her finally after the end of the year that he does this. And he sees a tree. He sees an apple tree. And he goes, wow, these apples look amazing. And he couldn't help himself. And he ate the apple from the tree. What ended up happening when he ate the apple from the tree? He fell asleep for a long time. So it's explained by the commentaries, specifically Rav Aryeh Kaplan. He says that this is the concept of us falling into taiva. That when we fall into taiva, meaning that we eat from the tree, then we end up having, our mind goes to sleep. It falls away into the consciousness of teva, into the consciousness of nature. So that's this our Torah right here. Va'az tefillah, and then your tefillah is in the concept of tefillah din. It's in the concept of judgment prayer. Va'sitra achra rotzeh levala, and now the sitra achra desires to swallow it. So what is this talking about here? So there is a famous Mishna, which is brought in Pirkei Avot. It says, when you pray, don't make your prayer rote, but rather make it one of rachamim, supplication, that your mamish, you're pleading with Hashem, you're crying to Hashem that Hashem should help you. Now, many people say, what's the reason that I can't pray like that? Why is it that even when I try to pray like that, it's still coming out without any energy, without any emotion, without any fire? So the reason is because the person's in a state of mochin dekatnut. His consciousness is being constricted. What's it being constricted from? From what happened prior to the prayer. That is either in the form of wasted seed, or he engaged in some act of attachment or internalization of taiva. And through this physical taiva in which that he engaged in and now has invested himself more in, his mochin, his consciousness now goes into exile. And now when he comes to pray, he can't pray with life force because life force comes from the mind. And the mind is in exile. So now your prayers are in the concept of din, judgment. They're not in the concept of rachamim. And now Rabbi Nachman says, based on Kabbalah, what happens is that prayer is now at, it's vulnerable to being swallowed by the nachash, because the nachash cannot derive life force from the mind alone. Like we know that the real reason that the nachash seduced Chava was in order to get to Adam. However, the nachash and Adam, they have no shaykh to each other. That Adam represents the Jewish mind, and the nachash represents the guf, right? The guf or the sitra achra has nothing. The body or the desires of the body have nothing to do with the Jewish mind. The Jewish mind of a man or a woman has one thing that it wants: devekut with Hashem, closeness to Hashem, because this is the source of all good. The guf wants physicality only. Physicality represents limitation. The body only wants limitation. The mind only wants unlimitedness. Now, why did Hashem make us in this way? To give us bechira, that with our heart, we can choose either our mind or our guf. That the heart is the point of free will. Chava is the point of free will. And Chava represents tefillah. So when I pray that I want my mind, that gives me the ability to connect my mind to my heart. And now I've chosen Hashem, and now my heart becomes a vessel for receiving my mind. That is, my prayer can be filled with life force. However, when I choose the guf, when I choose the body, when I choose physicality, when I choose limitation, automatically my mind, which represents and desires only to be unlimited, it goes away, it hides itself, it frees itself into the place of what's called sleeping. And now your prayer has no life force. So what do we do at such a time? So Rabbi Nachman gives the tikkun. Now you need a bal koach gadol. You need a spiritual master who has great spiritual power. That he's able to pray in the concept of din. Okay, so now we're going to need a little bit of a background. Rabbi Nachman says something very, very deep in the Likutey Moharan. What happens, let's say, when Jewish people start to pray to Hashem, right? They're praying in the Amidah with the minyan. They're praying at home. They pray in Hibodedut. So for all of these things, when they're praying, what happens to those prayers if Rabbi Nachman's teaching that when your mochin goes into gadlut, it goes into exile, so now you have no life force, and now your prayers are vulnerable to being captured by the other side. Because we know, like we just said, that Chava is wanted by the Nachash, because the Nachash can't get Adam without getting Chava first. Meaning, the way that the Nachash, or the negative forces in the world, receive life force from the Jewish mind, it gets it through the words that come out of the mouth of a Jew. And it, so to speak, swallows up the prayers. And through this, it receives the Jew's life force. So now Rabbi Nachman says, how do we get it out? So he says like this. There is a pasuk that Rabbi Nachman brings, and it's a pasuk that's from Tehillim. It says Hashem is going to dispatch from Zion the staff of your strength for you to rule Bekerev, inside your enemies. Bekerev. So Rav Chaim Kramer brings down in the Perush that inside your enemies, this looks superfluous. What does that mean? It means extra. The word inside doesn't need to be there. It could have just said Hashem is going to dispatch, he's going to send out from Sion the staff of your strength, which is referring to Mashiach. For you to rule Bekerev. For you to rule, it could just say your enemies. It doesn't have to rule inside your enemies. So Rabbi Nachman explains, inside is referring to its throat. Meaning that, so to speak, the throat of the negative side, which is called Paro, he swallows up the prayers of all of Klal Yisrael. Now, the only one who can cause Paro to vomit out, so to speak, all of those prayers is Moshe Rabbeinu. That Moshe Rabbeinu, who represents the front of the throat, according to Kabbalah, and Paro, if you flip the letters around his name, represents Oref, the back of the throat. He swallows up the prayers of all the Jewish people. And Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one who can cause Paro to vomit them out. And how does he do this? He do this through his din tefillah. Because what's the difference between, let's say, this great tzaddik and the rest of the Jewish people? That when he goes to pray, even though for him it's also din tefillah, because in a time of din, we're all in a time of din, including the tzaddik. However, the tzaddik is the only one who's gotten himself to such a point that he still knows that this is from Hashem. That even when he goes into mochin de katnut, his mochin de katnut does not separate himself from da'at. He doesn't lose the fact that everything that's happening is from Hashem for the best, in order that we should get closer to him. Even when, so to speak, his mochin de gadlut, his expanded consciousness goes to sleep, still he knows, as opposed to the rest of the Am, that everything is from Hashem. Not just in his mind, but still also in his heart. And the reason is because Rabbi Nachman explains elsewhere that someone's mochin de katnut is another person's mochin de gadlut. Meaning that the higher you go up spiritually, the higher you grow spiritually, the more so to speak, that your lower services become equal to the higher services of another person. Meaning that a tzaddik's eating is comparable, is equal to a person who's not at that level, his learning Torah. So too, when a tzaddik, when a real tzaddik, his mochin goes into katnut, he's also in the concept of din tefillah. However, because he still knows it's from Hashem, he can still pray with that fervor, with that energy, with that strength. And then as a result of that, he gets the nachash, he gets the other side, not only to throw up, so to speak, his own prayer from his throat, but he gets it to vomit up the prayers of all of Klal Yisrael. So we need the person who can pray a din prayer, that the Sitra Achra, it's not capable of swallowing. Instead, the Tzaddik's judgment prayer, which is called the staff of your strength, it sticks in its throat, and the Sitra Achra is forced to disgorge all the elements of Kedusha that it previously swallowed. So now we're going to be brought on to a very deep, very beautiful phenomenon. That is, that in a paradoxical way, through this process of the Sitra Achra swallowing the forces of the negative side, swallowing all the prayers of the Jewish people, and this great Baal Koach, this master of strength, this master of spiritual power, this great tzaddik, that when he comes to pray in that time of din, and he causes the Sitra Achra to vomit up all of those prayers, what ends up happening is he frees the souls that have been trapped also on the other side. And they end up becoming Balei Tshuva and converts. And this causes a greater revelation of godliness than if those prayers had never been swallowed in the first place. And this is the deep, deep reason why we went into exile in the first place. That Hashem said to Yaakov, don't be scared, that I'm sending you down to Mitzrayim and it's going to be good for you. And I'm going to be with you there, and I'm going to take you out. Yaakov didn't want to go down. It said that he went into a huge state of pachad, that he was trembling from fear, to think that he would leave his Abba b'shamayim, that he would leave Hashem, so to speak, in a state of devekut, and he would have to go down into exile, into the physical world, with all of the souls of Klal Yisrael, and they would, so to speak, be trapped by the other side to make them feel that they are just like everybody else, that we are sent here, so to speak, just to be like any other secular person, not to realize that we're actually here to free the whole world from slavery, and instead we become enslaved the most, psychologically, emotionally, physically, financially. And then all of our words, because we don't know who we are, because we're not connected to the truth that Hashem is the cause of everything that takes place in our life. So what ends up happening is all of our words are being swallowed by the other side. And this is causing us to be further and further engorged within the negative forces. However, when this great tzaddik is unleashed in the world and he comes to pray for all of Klal Yisrael, as we know, the Mashiach Zikenu, his main weapon, his clay Zion, says Rabbi Nachman, is tefillah. That when the Mashiach Zikenu comes, his tefillah is going to be so intense, it's going to be so powerful. And because his whole entire desire will only be to free the Jews from the forces of negativity and to help reveal godliness in the world. So then what ends up happening is you have an opposite effect, that the forces of the other side actually cause a greater revelation of godliness, because now the revelation of godliness takes place in the places that are furthest from Hashem to begin with, the places in which they could never get there to begin with. But now that they've been trapped in those very, very, very dark places by the souls of the Jewish people going into exile, now when those places are awakened to God consciousness, then what ends up happening is there's a revelation of godliness in that place, and it ends up spreading to those people's friends and family, cousins, and other souls that are connected to their souls. And this is when there's the greatest revelation of Shem. Like we said in Parak Yud in Likutey that we're learning Bezrat Hashem tomorrow night together, which is the Torah Purim, that we learn that the greatest revelation of godliness and the greatest honor of Hashem comes not when the Jewish people realize Hashem exists, even though that's the purpose, and we have to get to that point, but ultimately the greatest revelation of godliness comes when the whole world has turned on to the fact that Hashem ein milvado. There's nothing else besides him. Okay? Now this happens specifically when the Bali Tshuva and the Gerim come back. Now, interestingly, in the past 60, 70 years since the Holocaust, you've had a huge wave of Bali Tshuva and Gerim come back to Judaism. That you've had what they call the generation of Bali Tshuva, that they're coming in by the thousands, and it's increasing exponentially as time goes on. And you also see an ingathering of the exiles, that people from all across the world are having a yearning to go back to the land of Israel. And at the same time, you also see an uptick in converts of Jews. Now, what's the reason? Because we're nearing the coming of the Mashiach. And for the Mashiach to come back, you need, so to speak, the revelation of godliness to take place in the realms that are furthest from Hashem. And in some sense, the soul of Mashiach is connected most to those places that are darkest. And therefore, he is connected the most to the souls of the Bali Tshuva and to the converts. And this is a deeper reason, perhaps, why Rabbi Nachman says that when Mashiach comes, it will not be the ones who have been, so to speak, quote unquote, religious, the ones who have connected to the traditional forms of Judaism that will understand that this is the Mashiach. But it will be, so to speak, those people who are furthest from Hashem that will be the first one to acknowledge and to understand that this one's different, that this one's coming from a place of tremendous light, of revelation, that he wants only good. And that as opposed to seeing him as a threat, which maybe the rest of the normative Jewish world might think, that it will be the Bali Tshuva and the Gerim, the converts, who will see his light and will realize that this is the light of Mashiach. Now, interestingly, what happens? Something powerful. We know according to the Ramchal, we know according to the Vilna Gaon. We know according to the Baal Shem Tov. We know according to all the great Mikubalim and all the great Hasidic masters that one of the, so to speak, factors or paradigms which are going to shift with the coming of the Mashiach is going to be the reawakening of Navua. That Navua is going to come back into the world. Navua means prophetic inspiration. That the Jewish people are going to reattain the state of Navua, prophecy. That is, that we're going to mechaven to realities which go beyond physicality. We are going to be in tune and in sync with worlds of reality, of godliness that are taking place that far precede and go beyond the normative physical world. And this is what we're going to teach to the non-Jewish world. Now, when is that Navua going to come back into the world? So Rabbi Nachman teaches now, based on the Arizal, that it is when the souls of the Balei Tshuva and the converts come back to Hashem. When they say Hashem is Melech, and there's a revelation of godliness in those darkest places, then it is that Navua is going to come back into the world. Why is that? Because the root of the souls of the Jewish people is where Navua comes from, Rabbi Nachman says. So once the root of the Jewish souls is whole, meaning that all of the Jewish souls have come back, then Navua is going to come back into the world. Only once that place is perfected. And until that point, we can only have a shtickle of Navua. We can have Ruach HaKodesh. You have people even now in our generation that they're able to machaven, to understand things that are very deep without them being said. However, this is not full-blown Navua. Only in the times of the Mashiach, after the Geula, is there going to be full-blown Navua again, like we had in the times of the Beit HaMikdash. But this will only happen once all of Klal Yisrael is back in the fold. And that includes all the Gerim, all the converts, because then the Kisei Kavod is going to be whole. The throne of Hashem is going to be whole, because according to Kabbalah, the Kisei Kavod is not some chair. It's really, if you take all of the souls of the Jewish people and you put it back together, that's called the Kisei, the throne of Hashem. And that's the deeper reason why it says that until Amalek is destroyed, the throne of Hashem won't be whole. Because Amalek is the greatest threat to the Jewish people. His entire efforts is in order to dissuade us from being close to Hashem. And we understand in the times of Purim, who was the biggest threat? It was Haman. And he came from Amalek. And what's his entire goal? It's to get the Jewish people to disconnect from Hashem. Now, interestingly, we heard from the son-in-law of the Tasha Rebbe something unbelievable. And by the way, this is something I also have not seen before. The Tasha Rebbe, the entire time that his son-in-law was giving over Torah at the Tish, he was giving over Rabbi Nachman's Torah from Likutey Moran, from Likutey Halachot, from Sichot Aran, from Sipor Masiot. I asked him, I said, who's your rabbi? He said, well, I come from Tasha, and we follow the Kamarna Rebbe. This is the teachings that we learn. But my Rebbe is Rabbi Nachman. And I'm like, wow, that's unbelievable. I never heard of a chassid from a specific Hasidic sect that he himself associates his Rebbe not to be the Rebbe of his Hasidic dynasty. But you see that this is the power of Rabbi Nachman, that he breaks down all barriers, that you can even be a Tasha chassid and still hold that Rabbi Nachman's your Rebbe, because he didn't tell you to leave behind anything. He didn't tell you to give up your minhag. He didn't tell you to give up your traditions. He didn't tell you to be Ashkenazi or Sephardic. He didn't tell you even to leave your own Hasidic dynasty. He says you could be whoever you are. And if you want to run to Hashem, you want to get close to Hashem in truth, you want to run after the truth, you want to find closeness to Hashem like you never had in your life, and at all costs, so you can be my Talmud. You don't have to leave anything else behind. You can actually bring everything up with you. And this is the koach of the great tzaddik, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And he said in his drasha to us something amazing. He said, what was the source, says the Gemara, of Haman's reasoning for making Purim in the times of Adar, or Udar, as he called it. So it's a famous Gemara, and he says that he understood that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away in that generation. He passed away in Adar, so as a result of that, we're going to do it in Purim. We're going to do it in Adar, because this is when we know that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. He was the leader of the Jewish people. Tzaddik Yesod Olam, he's gone. So the son-in-law of the Tasher Rebbe says, you see that the Ikar, the main mistake of Haman, is to think that Moshe Rabbeinu is not still with us anymore. To think that because he passed away, his Ruach is not with us, that Moshe Rabbeinu is not with us. However, he was with us. And actually what we're going to learn in the 10th Torah of Likutey, he's with us through Mordechai and Esther. That Mordechai and Esther are, so to speak, the instruments who with Moshe Rabbeinu uses in order to bring Geula at the end. So that's a very deep thing. And Bezrat Hashem, we're going to learn that tomorrow night. So if you're available, you're in Queens, or you want to watch it online, it's at 9 p.m. in Od Yosef Chai tomorrow night. And we'll learn more about that, Bezrat Hashem. Okay? But for this, we're going to need that all of the souls come back. And we're going to have to destroy Amalek for that to happen. That's why it's one of the 3 mitzvot that have to take place when the Jews come back to the land of Israel, is that Amalek has to be destroyed. And as a result, once Navua comes back into the world, Emuna is going to be extracted from the other side. Because, so to speak, all of the Jewish souls that are trapped in exile, meaning our prayers are trapped in the throats of the Sitra Achra, when this great tzaddik removes them from the throat of the Sitra Achra, this is what's going to give birth to Emuna in the world, because we are Emuna. Like it says, we're believers and the sons of believers. La'amin b'chidush ha'olam. And the Emuna is not simply that we believe in Hashem. It's not simply that we believe in God. It's not simply that we believe that He controls our lives. It's not even that we believe that He's the source of creation or that He blows life force into everything. All of those are aspects of Emuna. However, Rabbi Nachman says the ikar of Emuna is that there is chidush ha'olam, the renewal of reality, that the world is being recreated at every moment, and that whatever takes place in this world is whatever Hashem wants to be happening. And at the next moment, if Hashem wants it to be different, He's going to make it different. And at that point, when all the souls have been released from the Sitra Achra, then Navua is going to flow through the world, and we're all going to see the truth. Maaseh Bereishit Tamid, that Hashem is recreating the world at every moment, and Amuna will be whole. Nitgaleh ayadei matan Torah. The core of this belief was revealed at the giving of the Torah, like we learned in the Parsha 2 weeks ago, and even last week. And what happened at that moment? Sha'az zachu kol Yisrael ruach Navua. Then all of the Jewish people were able to experience Navua. And through Amuna, Zochin lechidush haolam. And through Amuna, we merited to a renewal of the world, Shalatid. That's going to be merited in the future. We know, according to Kabbalah and Chassidut, that the whole entire event of Matan Torah is really a window, so to speak, into the times of Mashiach. That Mashiach is going to come down from the mountain like Moshe Rabbeinu. He's going to give us the new Torah, the Torah of Atik Yomin, the Torah of ancient days. And we ourselves are going to be privy to this whole state of Navua, that we see our master, that we get to see Hashem, like Yeshaya says, that we're going to get to see our king, our rabbi, Hashem himself. Bivchinat la'agi baboker astecha. Like the Pasuk says, to relate your chesed in the morning, ve'emunatecha beleilot, and your emunah at night. Bichinat chadashim lebakarim rabba emunatecha. Meaning that renewed will be the morning, rabba emunatecha. And we know that it's brought down from all the Hasidic masters, and Rabbi Nachman speaks about it constantly, that nighttime represents Emunah, represents this world, represents exile, that's why the whole entire ikar of this world is Emunah. And then ultimately, through our Emunah, says the Midrash, that we're going to merit to Geula, that is Alma Date, the world to come, that is Olam Ama Damita, the world of truth. That is the chiddush of the world. That is the renewal of the world. The chiddush ha'olam hu bechinat Eretz Yisrael. And the renewal of the world is the concept of the land of Israel. Shu legalot ha'hashgacha. This is the unique quality of the land of Israel, namely the power to reveal hashgacha. That when you're in the land of Israel, you mamish just feel Hashem. What's the reason that you feel Hashem? Because, so to speak, like on Shabbat, that we know that Hashem himself has full providence. During the week, the Zohar says that Hashem, so to speak, gives over the world to this malach that's called metat during the 6 days of the week. And that's why during the 6 days of the week, it feels up and down. It feels challenging. It feels difficult. We don't always feel or see Hashem. Shabbat comes, and if you prepared well enough, you mamish feel Hashem during Shabbat. So too, the land of Israel is, so to speak, the physical manifestation of Shabbat. That the land is called Shabbat. And that's why the land of Israel is so connected to the laws of Shabbat. That we know in this past week's Parsha, Hashem says to keep Shemitah. And Chazal explain that what's the whole reason that we had to go into exile? Because we didn't keep Shemitah. What's so connected to the fact of Shemitah, right? That for 6 years we work the land. For 1 year, we don't touch it at all. Because the land of Israel is the concept of Shabbat. So if there's a blemish, if there's a lacking in the concept of Shemitah, we can't also be in the land. Just like Rabbi Nachman teaches, what's the whole reason that Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to bring us into the land of Israel? Because he struck the rock instead of praying to it, instead of speaking to it. And because he blemished the concept of speech, emunah, tefillah, he blemished the concept of the land of Israel. He can't bring us into the same land. He can't bring us into the same state of consciousness that at the same time he himself is not holding by. So he wasn't able to take us into the land of Israel. So this is an answer finally that makes sense, even though there's many answers from Chazal about why Moshe wasn't able to take us into the land. And obviously they're all true. These are all the words of the living God. But at the same time, it's very hard to understand how Moshe Rabbeinu sacrificed himself his whole life to be able to get us into the land of Israel. He wasn't able to finally get us there. However, when we understand, it's more like a math equation. It's as simple as the fact that Eretz Yisrael represents Emunah Shlema, it represents perfected tefillah, the tikkun of tefillah. And at this moment that he was able to speak to the rock and, so to speak, perfect tefillah for all of Klal Yisrael and to show everybody that we can simply pray for the things that we want. And Hashem can give it to us because Machadesh, that Hashem is Machadesh, that he renews the world at every moment. And if he wants, he can do whatever he wants to reveal Hashgacha, divine providence. So now because that was blemished, he couldn't take us into the land of Israel because the land of Israel is the concept of I speak and Hashem gives. And this future revelation will make clear to everybody that the world is not governed by nature, but that nature itself is also the lowest revelation of Hashgacha. That it's only being controlled, that Metat is being controlled by Hashem through miracles and wonders. However, when you're in the land of Israel, even during the week, you can feel that it's Hashem. Then the mistaken emunah that people have in the natural order will be voided altogether. And it will be kulam tov, kulo tov, that the whole world will be Shabbat. And through this nimshach hashir chadash, then we're going to have a new song. Like Chazal teach us that there's 10 types of song. And in the future, when the Mashiach comes, Az Yashir, we're going to sing again, but this time it's going to be a different type of song that's ever been sung before, a new song, a Shir Chadash. That before we were called Tzion, for a few years, we actually called our Chevra, our Chabura, we called it Shir Chadash, and it came from Rabbi Nachman, accentuating this point, that in the future, when Hashgacha Pratit is revealed to be the only Hashgacha that there is, like right now, we have different types of Hashgacha on things, but the highest is called Badatz. Or there's many types on meat. And we have the highest called Beit Yosef. So too, there's many types of Hashgacha, but the highest is called Hashgacha Pratit. That is that Hashem controls the world. He does whatever he wants, whenever he wants. So Rabbi Nachman's students are still living with that reality now, even though it's said by Chazal, it would only be fully revealed in the times of Mashiach, that there's only Hashgacha Pratit. There is no such thing as Teva. However, Rabbi Nachman says, if you believe it with all your heart and soul and might now, you can live with it right now. And this is actually what's going to cause the Geula to take place. This is the Shir Chadash. This is the new song that Mashiach is going to sing. Shehu bechinat kol hamashke et hagan. This song is the concept of the voice that waters the garden. Like it's explained in Bereshit that there is a river that runs out of Eden and it waters the garden. And it's brought in Zohar and Tikuni Zohar that this river represents the Yesod. That is this concept of Tzaddik Yesod Olam. That this Tzaddik, he represents the Nahar, he's the river. That he flows from Eden, which represents the Ein Sof. And the Yesod, meaning this Nakuda Tova, this good point comes out of the Ein Sof, and it waters all four levels of existence, all the four tributaries, heads, which the Zohar actually says is connected the four letters of Hashem's name, but really represents, so to speak, all four worlds, with us as the lowest world. That's Olam Asiyah, the world of physical action. Now, this new song is going to water the garden, meaning all the worlds are going to be watered through this new song that is called Emuna Shlema, complete Emuna in Hashgacha Pratit. And through this voice, the soul sustenance, which is associated with what? This is the concept of smell, that we know that there's different faculties of the soul. And Chazal teach, is there any faculty of the soul which is just exclusive to the soul? And they say, yes, that is smell. That smell is the highest spiritual faculty. Now, interestingly, and we've said this before, psychologically even, it's been proven that, so to speak, smell taps you back into the oldest states of your existence. That we know that when you, so to speak, hear something, it can bring you back a few years. When you see something, it can bring you back even further. However, when you smell something, let's say you smell something that you smelled when you were 5 or 4 or 3, right? We know that according to psychology, you don't remember back then. However, you can smell something that can literally bring you back to that point. And why are we like that psychologically or neurologically? Because it is a window into our soul. That is, so to speak, that there's a smell, there's a fragrance that's going to be released in the times of Mashiach, that it's going to bring us back to ancient days. That Rabbi Nachman said that my path is very, very old, and yet it's brand new. It's so brand new that it's ancient. You guys can think about this one on your own. It's pretty deep. It's so new that it's completely ancient. And this smell, Reach, if you flip the letters around, so to speak, Bechinat Yira, it's the concept of Yira. Al Mizona de Gufa. This is what overpowers the body's sustenance. Meaning that once you have Yira and your soul is filled up, then your body is automatically filled and you don't need to fill it with limiting physical things. Like it says about Yaakov Avinu, Yado ochezet ba'akev Esav. His hand was holding onto Esav's heel, which as the back of the foot and lowest part of the body signifies the utmost physicality. So what is this hinting to? Something very deep. That Esav, so to speak, represents this physical world. When is Yaakov Avinu, or the Jewish people, revealed in all its strength? When is the soul of a Jew experienced in all its power, in all its might, in all its light? That's only going to be at the very end of existence, at the very end of history. And even though it looks like we're out and we're knocked out and down for the count, the real us is holding on to the heel of physicality. It's holding on to the heel of history. And it's at the very moment that we believe that we're never going to make it. There's a pandemic that's sweeping over the world and we're all in chaos, tohu vavohu, and we think that it's only going down and down and down and it couldn't get any worse. At that very moment, there's a great star which is going to shine, a great star which is going to rise and fly around and shoot above the clouds. And this is the star of scent. This is the star of Yira. This is holding on to the ache of Esav, the heel of Esav. And then Yaakov will become Yisrael. that what was at the heel will ultimately be the head. That was at the bottom will flip and become the top. Ein sham kol hetev hetev. Look there very, very well, and you will understand the wonders of this matter very much. So this is the end of this section in Halacha. Just 1 second. Does anybody have any questions from today's lesson? Any questions from today's lesson? Okay, everybody have an amazing day.